Well, I guess the trends are very similar around, higher inflation, higher interest rates, and a concern that those interest rates are starting to impact the real economy. I think the differences in Europe and in the UK is that getting inflation under control has not been quite as successful, you could say, as the Fed have managed to do. And there's also a huge divergence within the economies. So we think about the EU as one geographic zone, but in fact, if you look at the economic performance of Germany, for example, in recession, very industrial economy, not doing well, versus like Spain and Ireland, who are showing decent growth. So it's hard to make a uniform statement across the board, and certainly a lot of divergence between the individual country performance.
How difficult are higher commodity prices? Last year we were really worried about Germany and continental Europe. As gas prices rose up, they managed to avoid taking a huge hit from that by storing enough. But is it still a
Mhm.
concern?
Definitely. And I think it's a real concern right down to the consumer level in terms of perception, because as soon as the headlines start to come through, particularly about the oil price, everyone realizes how much that really impacts what they pay both for energy and also the cost of fuel at the pump here in Europe and the UK, which is much higher than it is in the US. So I think there's a bit of a concern that if consumers start to see that, they will then start to rein in spending as they prepare for perhaps another winter of significantly higher energy costs.
In Germany, I mean, I guess there's such a, I guess, a importance of China as a trading partner, and the China reopening has been disappointing relative to, I guess, maybe the beginning of the year expectations. How is Germany and its economy dealing with that?
Well, if you look at the headline numbers of the GDP levels, you could say not very well.
Yeah.
As you implied, Germany is obviously a big export economy, and pretty much reliant on a lot of those overseas markets, China just being just one of them. And if we think what happened through the pandemic, where we had supply chain issues, which was then impacting growth. And now we have it on the demand side. So we've gone through a full cycle with none of the upside of the upcycle, because you've had a bit of a double whammy on either side of that. I mean, there are other things that are specific to the German economy, a whole other topics around the green agenda and the cost for businesses to try and comply with what Germany are trying to do around sort of green and sustainable policies, which is definitely impacting the economy as well.
Is the green transition not going to be a driver of growth down the road? I mean, I look at expectations for the German economy, and they're
Mm.
low, obviously. We're looking for a contraction this year and only 0.6% GDP growth next year. But is the green transition going to be a driver there, or is Germany going to be penalized by its reliance on the internal combustion engine industry?
Yeah, I think if we were to look 10 years ahead and then look retrospectively, you might be able to say that the transition to green overall created jobs, created growth. I think the pain comes in the transition period. If you look at the number of people who are still employed in industries around fossil fuels, around the automotive industry, as in fuel-powered cars, not electric cars, it's huge. And you don't just get an automatic replacement of them; you get a displacement which impacts the economy before, call it, the new green economy starts to take off. And I think there are more concerns that the short-term pain of pushing towards sustainable policies. The same in the UK, and our Prime Minister's now starting to rein that in a little, because he realises that the transition period will be painful.